Okay, so today we will be discussing about the theory and philosophies in the social sciences, especially the philosophies that used in its inquiry and various research methods that aligns to it. Let's start. In turn, the social sciences as a whole is also a subject to this following three foundations. We have the epistemology, ontology, and methodology. With Hollis last 1994 differentiating them of with Mill and Marx. While both Mill and Marx espouse vastly different views, yet upon critical reading seem to be describing society through a variety of lenses. So we have the epistemology, ontology, and methodology. In our discussion, as if you can remember, methodology can further be described into two. Either can be looked into as into praxeology, or how can we apply practice to research, the theory to practice, while we also have teleology, the purpose of doing such research. On the ontological side, it embodies one substantive view of the world and its workings. It looks up on the real foundation of the world, the reality of the world that determines one's consciousness and their actions. So in ontology, we're actually looking at the object of the research in itself. Is it part of the researcher or not? Are we going to look at it differently, is the researcher should be apart from what is being researched, or should be part of what is being researched? So that's in ontology. While epistemology refers to the theory of knowledge, it basically means where knowledge comes from, how should it be generated, okay, how should be interpreted. So basically anything that's about knowledge, it's part of epistemology. It is how we know about the world we have, the way by which we determine our knowledge as sound, justified, or even true. Particularly within the context of the social sciences, epistemology is more concerned on how human consciousness and human action can be framed as the subject of a research or science. We can describe it as our manner of how we understand something, okay, being quite different from how it is described separately from our interpretation of it. Okay, while when we talk about methodology, it's more on focus on the method through which we can identify the reality, or we can identify answer to those research questions which may have been revised or distorted by one's awareness or interpretation. This method specifically can lead to some several causal explanations. So for comparison, we can look at this into this approach. When we talk about epistemology, it looks again on the nature, origin, and the limits of human knowledge. So on research, its goal is to know the basis or framework of such research. Some sample options of it is positivism, interpretative, and critical thinking. Later, we'll discuss them further. While ontology looks at the being of general, the subject of research, are the being of itself in general, or of what applies neutrally to everything, and what has to be established to suppose that a particular thing is real. Okay, the reason why ontology is very important in research, because its goal is to know the nature or purpose of such research, and how the researcher, how should he or her position themselves into the research. So it's either subjective or objective. In methodology, we have can be focused further in teleology and praxeology. In teleology, it refers to the explanation by reference to some purpose and or goal. Basically, in the research, it's the purpose or goal of such research. So, given that teleology is important, it can either put a research into an understanding if its really goal is to predict, or if its goal is to give meaning. While praxeology is the study of human action, it's basically based on the notion of how or what makes a human engage into a particular purposeful behavior. So the reason why we have praxeology in research, because it's used to bridge theory and practice, usually for interpretation and or presentation of data. So it can either be strict rule, rigid, or creative or analytical, depending on the situation. So let's try to focus on them one by one. In terms of ontology, Marx and Mill have a different perspective on how they see society. For example, Marx held that society is organized through class and power dynamics which pervade social relations as largely determined by structures in society, compared to Mill, where he held that human individuals are divorced from any structure, rather they are defined by their capacity to act on their own will or desires. It makes now an understanding or ontological understanding towards social sciences varying. Okay, and ontology can now be understood in social sciences as articulated in various ways and emphasis throughout the different disciplines and field can also varies. Okay, and since there is this contention and variation when it comes to ontological positions, um, we have determined at the very least at least four. Okay, Rich George surmised that there are only three broad themes, but for the sense of our discussion, I've included another one. Okay, it's primarily because again, like what I told you before, unlike the natural sciences wherein they follow a particular paradigm or a particular position. In social sciences, it can vary, especially depending on how do they see the world. Okay, that's why we have four. You have normativism, naturalism, constructivism, and realism. In normativism, it's actually a question of norm. So it focuses on the idea that a particular research can be answered to based on what is ought to be done, or what is idea and virtuous, and we should base our actions and understanding towards a research or a problem based on what is ought to be. Okay, that's why it's called normative. Okay, because we are basically relying to a norm or a particular value that we hold on, and that particular value that we hold on, the particular virtue that we hold on, will be the basis of what should be recommended. Okay, but compared to normativism, naturalism and constructivism or reductionism see it differently, using naturalist point of view, and at the same time inserting the idea of objectivism. This particular school of thought asserts that social phenomena that make up our social world have an existence of their own, and they should be treated apart from and independent of the social actors, which is us humans, who are involved. So the relationship of the social sciences and the natural science here, especially with respect to method, is very important. This particular area focuses on the concern whether the social sciences, in its pursuit of being scientific, should be adherent solely to the natural science method. So this is very, in a way, strict on the application of the scientific methods and the approach and perspective on the social sciences. So in this sense, we should see the research objectively. Okay, the subject of the research should be independent from the one researching. Okay, but compared to naturalism or objectivism, reductionism and constructivism sees it differently, since this particular school of thought asserts that the social phenomena making up our social world are only real in the sense that they are constructed ideas which are continually being reviewed and reworked by those involved in terms in them through social interaction and reflection. Thus, the aim of this is to clarify how social structures relate to or even influenced by individuals that make up these structures. In a manner of speaking, it can pose questions such as, can the church and the government, or the government imposes its view on the people in society? Or is society truly made up of individuals that act on their own accord? Okay, so basically, instead of looking at it objectively, you will be in a way looking at it subjectively, and you will take into account the perspectives of those people or actors involved. Instead of treating them totally separate, you will be taking them as totally important and equally important to the study of research. But setting itself apart from the rest, we have realism, where it asserts that the social world has a reality that is separate from the social actors involved in it, but at the same time can also be known through the senses as well, as the effects of the hidden structures and mechanisms are important. Hence, it's as if we can see a bit of objectivism, but at the same time with consideration of the hidden structures and the mechanisms, since you cannot only rely on what we see or what we sense, what we can feel. We also have to look beyond what is being sensed to. Hence, it can go deeper from what we already have, or what we're already seeing, or what we're already sensing. There is something more beyond what's being observed. So in realism, it's a way in a way it's kind of an appreciation of the objectivist point of view, but at the same time it tries um, to challenge those views based on who are the hidden structures and mechanism that making us see that. Okay. All in all, however, one can surmise that the social sciences necessarily follow certain schools of thought in its pursuit of understanding society and all of its facets. So the natural sciences, then, according to Baronov, are founded with the various approaches. So according to Baronov, we have at the least positivist, interpretivist, and anti-foundationalism or critical theory. Okay, and these are the at least three foundational epistemological positions. Uh, when we say positivism, it asserts that the knowledge of a particular social phenomenon should be based on what can be observed and recorded rather than subjective understandings, while interpretivism prioritizes people's subjective interpretation and understanding of social phenomenon and their actions, while critical theory or anti-foundationalism asserts that knowledge of a social phenomenon is based on both what can be observed and recorded and hidden structures of the mechanism whose effects can be observed. But from these three, we can further um, divide it into depending on the development of each tree. Positivist, for example, we can actually divide it into three, especially depending on how it evolved throughout time. We have embryonic, logical, and post-positivist. Embryonic is the idea of positivism present in a form of, or the mind of Saint-Simon and Comte when they have expanded this idea. It's the initial attempt of philosophers, particularly of Henry de Saint-Simon and his student Auguste Comte, into incorporating natural sciences approach into social sciences. So this type of positivism, which according to Auguste Comte, we have developed from a metaphysical world into a more positive world, have brought revolutions, or in a sense renaissance in the field of social sciences, since it combined a belief of progress and a passion for serving humanity through incorporation of natural sciences. So with strict application of natural sciences, according to the perspective of Saint-Simon and Comte, its goal is to, at the very least, make things or see things in a more positivist way. but logical positivism challenged that. Okay, they refer to a more modern version of empiricism, which takes the idea or the doctrine that all knowledge about matters of fact should stem from and relies on sensory experience and must remain hypothetical. So, like the classical empiricists, it's positive in a broadest sense because it postulates scientific inquiry and totally rejects metaphysics. However, its ultimate goal is to unify science. And by unifying science, it means that its method is totally logical in its analysis, and its goal is to unmask traditional philosophical problems as pseudo problems or transform them into empirical problems. So instead of just taking them into a more metaphysical understanding, they totally reject metaphysics and take them into a more empirical problem. So factual knowledge in this sense results only from experience, which rests on what is immediately given, which is in a way positivists. So they totally rejects metaphysics and rely on logical approach when it comes to determining the validity of a particular experience. However, as positivism progress, it also challenges itself with the existence of post-positivism. It subsumes a plurality of epistemological positions that intended to supersede positivism without requiring objective knowledge to succumb to epistemological anarchy or anything goes relativism. So we need to the goal here is at the very least still challenge positivism, but in a way avoid being anything goes relativism, because if you are very relative to the point that everyone has their own position, it will be anarchical. Okay, since we do not have a particular truth or position to hold on, but at the same time it is challenging positivism on how can we actually make or get more research or more information without totally relying to positivist approach. So in a way, post-positivists is participating in two levels of debate here. Number one, they pit themselves against positivists, and number two, they are pitting also themselves against relativists. Relativists include postmodernists and some certain constructivist approaches that we will be discussing later. So in contrast to positivists, post-positivists are not classical foundationalists or classical empiricists who claim that knowledge needs a secure foundation. They really are challenging that idea of secure foundation, considering that it can be challenged all throughout. So instead of totally becoming foundationalist or securing a particular footing for science, for post-positivists, they would want to challenge them and continue progress without securing into a particular foundation or truth. But also, post-positivists are contrasting themselves from relativists since they acknowledge that scientists put forth claims to truth that are warranted despite being fallible. Okay, so in this sense, post-positivism offers researchers another choice besides to positivism and relativism. So they would want to have a different approach instead of being positivist, instead of being relativists. Speaking of relativists, we have the interpretivism. In this sense, again, you are looking at it in a more a different sense, okay, since you are taking it to account that instead of just solely relying to what is already there, you are also looking at subjective sense of things where everyone has different interpretation to things. And based on this, we have at the very least three: structuralism, hermeneutics, and phenomenology. Although hermeneutics and phenomenology uh, now considered coexisting. But for the sake of our discussion, we'll try to differentiate hermeneutics from phenomenology. Although again, today it is used almost synonymous. When we say structuralism, it is actually a mode of knowledge to which nature and human life is interested in the relationship rather than individual objects, or alternatively where objects are defined by the set of relationship of which they are part and not by the qualities possessed by them, taken in isolation. So the goal of structuralism is to build connections and establish that such phenomena are a consequence of context of pervasive institutions or conditions. In this sense, herein, the use of senses alone was not sufficient. Reasoning and making connections, and the immersion of oneself within the bounds of the context of phenomena became much necessary. Okay, so it doesn't just look into the individual, it is also looking at how the larger structure of society influences a particular individual. While hermeneutics refers to the science, art, or technique of interpretation paradigmatically of written text, but by extension of human actions and other social phenomena. In this extended sense, it has come to denote a variety of approaches in the social and behavioral sciences. We can take hermeneutic as another vein of critique against positivism, since it believes that the social phenomena cannot be subjected to the same methods of the natural sciences. Thus, subjectivity was the rule when it comes to hermeneutics, since subjectivity is its primary aim, and creation of interpretation and establishing people's interpretation to the of the social phenomena of or to the social phenomena is way more important rather than the phenomena, just the phenomena itself. Okay, while phenomenology is all about the experience, okay, it's transforming the objects and actions of everyday action into a particular phenomena, and it aims to clarify the ways of givenness to the world of the world in relation to an experiencing subject. From the very beginning, sociality, according to phenomenologists, has been among its area of research, ranging from the question of other minds and emotions and of embodiment as the basic human condition to an investigation of the life world as the ground and horizon of all experience, and the other as a fundamental challenge to the autonomous subject such as the human. And this understanding, it has inspired research in various other disciplines, including cognitive science, since it is more focused on the experience. Again, phenomenology is all about understanding the experience and such how such experience shape the social reality or shape the social phenomenon. But then again, hermeneutics or phenomenological approaches now coexist and are even combined with more structural conceptions of social science, or once modeled more closely on the natural sciences. Lastly, we have the critical theory or the anti-foundationalism, in which they assert that knowledge of a social phenomenon is based on both what can be observed and recorded in hidden structures and mechanisms whose effects can be observed. So rather than focusing exclusively on issues of economic distribution, for example, like what Marx is doing before, critical theorists further emphasize the psychological, cultural, and even anthropological sources of unhappiness. So instead of just focus on the materialist understanding of the world, which defined Marxist critique to the society, critical theorists provide a much more wider range of approach. So they also look at the psychology, cultural, and anthropological sources of the unhappiness, which makes the oppression, continuous ruling class happens. More recently, actually the terms critical theory and even critical social inquiry have been used to refer to a variety of approaches in social science and even humanities that have resemblance to the original work of what we call the Frankfurt School. Such critical theories may also include critical race theory, some feminist work of our contemporary world, the socially critical work of Michael Foucault, Jean Baudrillard, and some other postmodern social theories. And even the work of various contemporary non-orthodox Marxist social critics can also be still look into this and still part of the anti-foundationalism. Again, the idea of the critical theorists or anti-foundationalists are to challenge both the interpretative and the positivists by looking at things in a larger perspective, since it tries to look into the conception of things through which struggles and conflict is based upon. So if you're going to look at this, we can have it in this way. We can say that constructivists and objectivists are separate depending on what research approach you are seeing. When we say constructivist, it can be qualitative, while objectivist can be quantitative in the research approach. In interpretivist, it can be qualitative, positivist can be quantitative, but if you can see, realist and critical theory can be both, or actually is preferred to be both. Okay, since its epistemological and ontological position varies, especially depending on the nature of the research or the subject of the research. When it comes to teleology, qualitative approach is most focused on giving meaning, while the quantitative approach looks at predicting or generalizing. In praxeological approach, qualitative sees it in a more creative or if not analytical. Quantitative also sees in praxeological position, quantitative research is more on rigid rule of scientific method and much more strict. When it comes to data gathering, the methods usually involves interviews, FGDs, observation, or even gathering secondary text or documents, while quantitative is more of survey, experiments, or census. Usually, quantitative research involves gathering primary data instead of just secondary, although census is in a way a secondary data since it comes from the government, but usually um, quantitative researchers create their own data. In terms of data analysis, usually qualitative research involves thematic analysis or content or narrative, discursive, or even framework analysis depending on the nature of the research. While in quantitatively, it usually involves statistics, either descriptive or inferential statistics. While all the above we all the discussed approaches may seem rigid or dogmatic, you have to remember that these approaches that themselves are capable of flexibility and can necessarily be adopted based on the goals and preferences of the researchers employing them in their own respective study. In a way, positivists are able to adopt non-quantitative methods, while structuralists may also take a look at phenomena as far removed from the respective institutions. So, all of these approaches and theories can be considered constitutive as they propose vastly different foundational perspective and research approaches, and they make massive contribution to the identity and formation of social sciences with respect to their subject matter. Social science themselves have faced criticisms in the past, especially with respect to being a science per se, especially when it comes to values. Okay, because social scientists in a way also is not totally agree with the value-free approach. Regardless, the methods employed and the salience of the information unearthed are sufficient in scaffolding uh, the scientific nature of this the pursuit of the social knowledge. Okay, remember, remember our initial discussion about science. What makes a science science? So it doesn't necessarily need to have a particular method alone. It can vary, especially in social sciences. Now, you might be confused with the terms, concepts, theories, and paradigms that I am actually saying earlier. Let's try to have a clearer understanding of them. When we say theory, it's actually a set of ideas or related concepts which can be used to explain and understand an event, situation, or social phenomena. As compared to concept is just the abstract idea. It is encapsulate a way of describing or thinking about social phenomenon. So in a way, concept is just an abstract idea. It's used to describe, but theory is the explanation of it. So in a way, we can say that concept is just part of theory. Concept is just a small chunk of idea that is being described, while theory is the entire explanation itself. So if you're going to look at the next slide, next slides in the succeeding slides, you can actually understand the difference between them. Because the epistemological positions we earlier identified are usually based on theories of knowledge, and as such provide us with theories of social research which attempt to explain the nature of social science research itself. Whatever approach we take to our research theory will be research our theory will be part of it and is always part of it, just as we are all researchers, so we are all everyday theorizers. Okay, remember that. Theories are a set of ideas which attempt to explain something. The relationship between two characteristics, why particular events occur, how some people come to hold particular views or behave in particular ways. In an everyday understanding, we draw our own theories to explain what is happening to us. In conversation, we often try to explain ourselves to others by drawing on ideas about the way things are or ought to be and how things work. And this depends on our shared common experience of being social human beings. We use our own experience, ability, to empathize, and our ability to empathize, and understand these things and apply these things uh, to correlate to each other. For example, if for example we wanted to understand what's the easier way for us to have higher grade, you will theorize. If you spend more reading, you'll have better assignment and you have better grade. So you have related the concepts of reading and studying as one, as a an important element for you to have higher grade. So a theory there, which you can eventually disprove, but you can easily establish a theory from that. For example, how related are your personal worries and stresses in your academic work? It can have an explanation coming from your experience. For example, she's not good. She's not got such good remarks this year because a hard time, because her parents have divorced, or her grandmother has been ill. Those can be used as explanations. Those explanations are the theories. Okay, are the theories. In addition to using theories in social research, social scientists and also natural scientists develop and use theories to attempt to explain the nature of the phenomenon they are studying. Just as there are different ways of explaining the nature of social research, so there are different ways of explaining how a social phenomenon like the family, for example, comes to be seen or understood as it is. As social researchers, we need to identify both our theories and about our research topic, and to find out about the theories other researchers have already used or developed from their own research finding. This is where literature is very important. O'Brien uses the example of the kaleidoscope to demonstrate the way theories help us to study social world. When you turn the tube and look down the lens of the kaleidoscope, the shapes and colors visible at the bottom change. As the tube is turned, different lens come into play and combinations of a color and shape shifts from one pattern to the other. So it's as if you're looking at the microscope. In every microscope have different lenses, and each lenses have different way of looking apart the same particular organism or species. It means it's like the society take these theories as a way of you looking at social reality or social phenomenon. You can can use them into various lenses for them to be seen into various ways. So theories are like lenses, which can bring different aspects of the social world into view and can help us to see the social world in new different ways. So, in social theories are often described at different levels to our areas of social world, which they can be said to cover. It can either be macro, meso, or micro. When we say macro, sometimes it is also referred as grand theory. They are the attempt to cover all aspects of social world in general terms. While meso means middle, so middle level theories relating to social phenomena usually found such as in organizations, institutions, community, or even family. While micro local theory is only relating to a particular specific area, group of people, and even aspect of social world. Macro level theory influence the social scientists think about social world as a whole and can provide the basis for the development of other theories at lower level and related to more specific aspect of social world. For example, when it comes to the teenage gangs and family, in macro level, you can see masculinity as a socially constructed or in different ways in different times and culture. But in meso theory, if within a particular culture, masculinity is socially constructed as a powerful and dominant, this which can use and is evident to the family and organizations, especially on how are they structured. But in micro level, this is where the teenage gangs comes in. So young men who join gangs often lack power over other aspects of their lives, and they seek power through membership of a gang and committing crime. So let's say young men have lack of power inside their families, and because of this lack of power in their families, it is displaced into gang membership for to which they are exercising such power, something that they don't experience on their own family. So that's in micro. So from macro, seeing masculinity as the very general problem of things, meso level is looking at them in the middle level, community, family, or institutional level, while theory is more on the individual level. Okay, in this example, we see it from masculinity in general, masculinity being applied to family institutions, then masculinity being applied to young men who are have displaced understanding or display or who doesn't have or is not experiencing some sense of power into their own families or organizations and trying to seek it through membership to a gang or committing a crime. Theories at macro level that attempt to encompass the social world also cover the social phenomena of social research in itself and include within the theory ideas about the nature of social world and the acceptable ways of studying it. It means that particular theoretical approach can include its own ontological and epistemological position. Bringing together theory about social world with particular ontological and epistemological position in this way is used to be referred to as paradigm. And this is where paradigm comes in. When we say paradigm, it's an entire constellation of beliefs, values, techniques, and so on that's shared by members of particular community, in our case, scientific community. We can also describe paradigm as a cluster of beliefs and dictates which scientists in a particular discipline influence what should be studied, how research should be done, and how research results should be interpreted, and so on. So, with theory, along with its own ontological and epistemological position in place, are now already constituted to a much bigger paradigm. So, now basing on concepts we discussed earlier, we can now differentiate a concept to a theory and to a paradigm. Compared to natural sciences who are dominated by any time by a single paradigm, science developed through different revolutions in which an old paradigm is being replaced by a new one. Social science is different since it is a battleground of contending and competing by paradigms. These paradigms can also take form in the broad social philosophies, which is usually called political ideologies such as liberalism, conservatism, socialism, fascism, and even feminism, and so on. Each presents its own account of social existence. Each offers a particular view of the world. To portray these ideologies as theoretical paradigms is not, of course, to say the most, if not all, social analysis is narrowly ideological. In the sense, it advances the interests of a particular group or class depending on the nature of it. But rather, it's actually a mere recognition or acknowledgement that social analysis, in a sense, usually carried out on the basis of a particular ideological position. So it's not about they are doing this research because you are, let's say, defending the liberals or defending the conservatives, defending your president, but it's all about they have a different philosophies to hold on, and they have a variety of things on how to look at the world. Again, as I said earlier, our understanding towards social phenomena is like different lenses, and these lenses and social scientists themselves also have different lenses. That's why it is very important whenever you are having studies or reviewing literature, you also have to ask what is the paradigm that the researcher or the particular writer is adhering to. If it's something that it can be also important to me and to my research. So you cannot basically say that everything that you read in papers and even literatures are all the same. No, or are all reliable or totally like a Bible or a gospel truth that cannot be challenged. No, they themselves are challenging it themselves. Okay, so nothing is gospel truth, especially here in social sciences. So what have we discussed in this lesson? Number one, we discussed the differences between ontological and epistemological position along with the methodology, and then we describe different ontological positions, then epistemological positions, and their respective viewing approaches. We've also discussed about the praxeology and the teleology and how are they related can be used to the research. We've differentiated theories from concepts into paradigms. Concepts basically are those descriptors that the words or the ideas themselves that used to describe a particular phenomenon, while the related concepts being drawn together to explain or understand a particular situation or phenomenon is called theory. Theory can be macro, micro, or meso. Macro, looking at it in a larger level, meso, looking at it in a more community, family, or institutional level, while micro is looking at it in the individual lives of the people involved. While paradigm is the larger one, usually the influence of the very huge influence of particular scientific community, a constellation of theories and ideas that come together since they have the same ontological and epistemological positions to hold on. So those are our um, different things, usages of words. So mostly, hopefully, eventually in the future, you already have understood what's the difference between concept, theories, and paradigms. So whenever I use them, you already have an idea on what are they. Okay, so this is it. That's just the end of our discussion. Thank you very much for listening, and see you in the next class.